For 25 years, Warrabinda been talking about getting their language back. And Beresford came up with the idea then is part of the curriculum when they were started to do a curriculum up. And they said, language is important for a lot of our people to find out who we are, who they are. He said, we need to get some people together. So I went and got 3 other people, Diane Evans, Steve Kemp, Milton Lawton, and, a few others. And a lot of our discussion was, around how do we get language back into Warrabinda? How do we find our language? There's about 6 of us from Warrabinda went down to that language workshop. That was in John Oxley Library, looking into the archives, trying to find languages. There was a few languages, but it wasn't connected to, say, Warrabinda. And at that workshop, I think coordinator for the library there, he said, there's another workshop, a language workshop in Alice Springs. And he's saying that there's 3 American Indians that lost their language and they brought their language back, where they hadn't spoken any of their language for 250 years. And it's only in the last, say, 20 or 30 years that they got their language back. It might be good for 1 or 2 of us to go over there. Just listening to these 3 from South America, how they went about collecting their language. And it was through this one lady, and she was really frustrated about her language and how she went about a couple of years trying to find people who knew a lot of language, but there were sort of very few. Someone put her onto a linguist in America, so she approached him and how linguists are, they talk that jargon, and she got real frustrated, so she sort of walked away, but she thought about a lot of stuff. She said, nah, it's too important, our language, I've got to go back. So she went back and approached her, but in the second time round, it was more, she felt a lot more comfortable, and sort of he came down to her level, and a lot of the language started to come out. And after 30 years, she had up to 6,000 of her people starting to learn their language. So it's a long, long journey to, Yeah. And I suppose it's going to be the same with us. I kept in touch with Margaret, and I told her about our situation here in Warrabinda, struggling to find any of their languages. Told her the story about how many languages that were in Warrabinda. She helped us to find a linguist, and if you can find some of the tribes that were brought here. So I rung up Margaret and gave her a big list of how many people that were brought here. And she took it to this other old fellow, Gavin Breen. And he looked at the list of all the people that, the languages and, with the tribes and all that. And he, sent me a letter back. He said, yes, I can help you with all those languages because most of those people from those tribal group, I went out and visited and recorded a lot of language from most of those language groups. I told him the main one was, say, Gungaloo and Wadja. So he gave me a list of some of the Gungaloo and Wadja. And I told him about Gungabulla, where I come from. And he said, yeah, I got Bidjara and Gungabulla language too. So he sent those few over. Just looking at some of those languages, we were just overwhelmed and looked at each other and say, how are we going to teach this? We're not linguists. So, and yeah, just looking at a lot of those words and seeing all those double R's and double I's and E's and double O's, and said, how do we put all this together, you know? Then Margaret, she got, rung me back and she said, talked about Gavin, and we was talking about him and things like that. And then I sort of started there, and I told him, that we were struggling with just how to pronounce a lot of the words and things like that. And so then he sent some recordings over, and a lot of jargon, sort of things, like how to pronounce those words and how to sound it, and put your tongue right back up in the roof of your mouth, and and still we never got it properly right. So he eventually, Margaret brought him over to us. So we had some workshop with him, and they were really uplifting to us. And we started to get a better understanding, a good understanding of how to put it all together. And it never stopped there, because Margaret kept on coming back over the next, 3 or 4 years to see how our progress and everything like that. But in those 3 or 4 years that she were coming here, she were bringing other people from other areas after, listen to them. And Gavin, things started to become clearer, but it took us at least 12 to 18 months to really pick it up. Yeah. So it's going to be still a long way to go. From 2012 to 2015, he gave us a lot more information of how to, what would you call it, the foamies, how to pronounce a word, how to make sentences. A really exciting journey for Steve Kemp and myself, because we're the one that's sort of putting it all together.